أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله اللهم لعن ولا ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله اللهم لعنهم جميعا ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. Some believers visit the graves of great people that have passed from this world. Others, upon observing this, arrive at the conclusion that this is something that is what you would call an innovation or heretic, or heresy I should say, or some kind of polytheism and something that is not accepted. In fact, one of their scholars, upon seeing the grave of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina al-Munawwara, when he entered, he said that as he was walking on his walking stick, he said that my walking stick is better than the Prophet. And I asked him why. He said, because I use my walking stick and I lean on it. It gives me support. Whereas the Prophet is dead and does not benefit me. This is introduction to what? The idea of visiting the graves. But before we talk about visiting the graves, we need to understand the origin of a grave. Because if you take a look at different people deal with the dead differently. So different people deal with the dead differently. You see some people, they'll burn the dead in forms of cremation where they will scatter the ashes, but most commonly done, and what is known, is to bury the dead beneath the ground. To what we do, and when we bury the dead beneath the ground, what is the origin of this and what is the purpose behind it? You have a lot of debate over this. If you research it, where did it originally come from? What we have in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions the story of Qabil and Habil. He says, فَطَوَّعَتْ لَهُ نَفْسُهُ. He says, فَطَوَّعَتْ لَهُ نَفْسُهُ قَتْلَ أَخِيهِ فَقَتَلَهُ فَأَصْبَحَ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. So it says about Cain or Qabil that his soul or his nafs permitted for him to what? To kill his brother. And he became of the losers. So in other words, his desires overcame him to the point, his envy towards his brother made him kill his brother. So we all know the story of Cain and Abel and how he killed his brother. However, a story happens there, is where we learn where burial came from. Allah says in the Quran, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ غُرَابًا يَبْحَثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ لِيُرِيهِ كَيْفَ يُوَارِي سَوْءَةَ أَخِيهِ قال يا ويلتى أعجزت أن أكون مثل هذا الغراب فأواري سوءة أخي فأصبح من النادمين. I don't want to go into the tafsir of what asbaha min al-nadimin means, that he was in regret. But I'll explain what it says here. Allah sent a raven. If you never noticed, the raven is the harbinger of darkness. Whenever you hear the word raven, a raven's always associated with what? Doom and death. You know, when you see the raven, you just get that chill down your spine. You know, even Edgar Allan Poe, when he wrote his famous piece that he wrote, a poetic piece with, it was called, and the one where he says the raven said nevermore. And it's just supposed to be a horrific episode where this raven would not leave this man and drove him mad. The raven's always been seen in this manner. It's associated with death. So this raven's come along and witnessed Qabil killing his brother. So the raven comes down, and what does it do? It digs up the earth. It digs up the earth to show Qabil what to do with the corpse. So then he says to himself, you know, what kind of a person am I? That it's a disgrace, woe unto me that I failed to learn, so I have to do what this crow or raven does. You know what I mean? I have to learn from what this crow or raven has done with the body of my brother. So this is where we had the concept of how to bury. It began there. But if we have a look at our association with the dead and visiting graves, many cultures and faiths have what they call festivities for remembering the dead, and they have a lot of them. All Saints Day. I think it's a Catholic a celebration on the 1st or 2nd of November after Halloween. It has no association with Halloween at all, and also the Mexicans have a counterpart of that, what they call the El Dia de los Muertos, which means the Day of the Dead. They also have a day where they celebrate their relationship they have with dead people. So cultures have always formed a link and an association with those that have died. They never see that those that have died have left us. There's always a connection. There's always a connection with those that have passed before us. But what is the benefit of visiting graves? Before we talk about is it permissible or not permissible, because we are scorned for this, what is the benefit of actually going to the cemetery? Firstly, we visit them, we honor their remembrance. When you visit your deceased, you honor their remembrance. You go there, you sit with your family, you say, this is, if you see outside, we have a mini remembrance shrine, somewhere where you sit there and remember those that have passed from this community, and you read the Fatiha for them, and you remember them. You have a memory you look at, and you remember them in this manner. So that's the first thing, is to honoring their remembrance. Secondly, it makes you feel comfort with all your problems. You know why? Because when you go to the cemetery, you realize death is inevitable. Everyone's going to die. So you feel comfortable. You go, there's going to come a day for me that I'm gone. There'll be no more Trump, no more Israel. I'm serious. This is the thoughts that go through your head. No more Charlie Hebdo drawing characters of the Prophet and laughing about it. No more people disgracing and abusing my religion. No more people disgracing me and abusing me. In the world that we live, no more rich gobbling up everything that's on the earth and the poor people suffering. No, all this suffering that you see is going to go. So it gives you comfort. So you start realizing it's only temporary. And everyone is going to get their comeuppance. And I start knowing this. No more all this new liberal culture, all these SJWs, social justice warriors, ramming their ideas down people's throats, all these right-wing extremists doing the same. That's all going to be gone. It's going to be over. So that is another benefit that we get from going to the cemetery. The third is it's a lesson to us about what? And I'm not telling you to actually read the epitaphs when you go to the cemetery, to read what's written. But if you were to realize The people that are at the cemetery, the people that are buried there are what? Doesn't discriminate by their age. You don't go to the cemetery and everyone's 90 years plus. The cemetery doesn't discriminate with age. You don't go to the cemetery and see that everyone there is what? Female or male. It doesn't discriminate with gender. It doesn't discriminate. You don't go to the cemetery and see, oh, well, only Anglo-Saxon Protestants are here, or African, or Asian. It doesn't discriminate with race. You don't go to the cemetery and see only a cemetery for Muslims. There's a cemetery for Muslims, Christians, Jews, and all others. So we know that death doesn't discriminate with religion. Everyone will die. I may hear a sermon right now. You may listen to someone talk to you about death. But the thoughts they give you is pretty abstract of what the cemetery is. The picture that, they say a picture speaks 1,000 words. The picture that you see when you actually go to the cemetery and the reality, especially why is it very recommended to be involved in the washing of a body, in the shrouding of a body. Why? Because you're seeing what? You're seeing what's about to happen to you. Even following the janazah. I don't know if anyone's witnessed the actual burial. The burial's the most horrific of all of it, of all these things. In fact, it's recommended when you bring the body towards the grave, it's not good to put the body immediately in the grave. It says you bring them and you drop them once, you bring them down to the ground once, you lift them, you bring them down to the ground a second time, and then a third time before you place them in the grave. Why? It's like preparing them for this lowering into the grave. This body's about to be put in a home where they're all alone. So when I go to the cemetery and I witness all this, it has an effect. How does it have an effect on me? Knowing that death doesn't discriminate, that my time will come. This is what brings us to the fourth point. It's the best reminder on us to focus on what is real. If I have debts, to pay them off. If I've harmed people, to make amends with them. If I owe prayers, I need to pray them. Everything that I've done wrong, for me to rectify them before my expiry date arrives. Imam Al-Qadhim, salawatullahi wa salamu alayh, when he sees the cemetery, he says, Inna shay'an hadha akhiruh lahaqiqun an yuzhada fi awwalih. He says, Inna shay, a thing, meaning us, humans especially, that we are this thing he's talking about. Inna shay'an hadha akhiruh. He says, if a thing, if that's the end of a thing, the cemetery, he says, lahaqiqun an yuzhada fi awwalih. If this is where you're going to end up in the cemetery, he said, the awwal, the beginning, you should take lightly. Shouldn't be something you should be too attached to. Because when people start hoarding things, when people, if you ever see, for example, the ancient kings, ancient pharaohs in ancient Egypt, if you see their tombs, their sarcophagus that's made of gold, and all these trinkets and jewelry that's with them, that they wanted to take with them, and who ends up taking it? Grave robbers. I know you might be thinking, they weren't taken by grave robbers, they were taken by British archaeologists. They're grave robbers with a degree. That's the difference. They're still grave robbers. All these are taken, they don't go with you. Nothing remains with you but your actions. Then the Imam says, وَإِنَّ شَيْئًا, this is a scary part of the narration. He says, وَإِنَّ شَيْئًا هَذَا أَوَّلُهُ لَحَقِيقٌ أَنْ يُخَافَ آخِرُهُ. He says, and a thing, meaning you, we are that thing, this person. If this is this thing's beginning, they should fear what is their end. If this is where you're going to start the hereafter, you start in a cemetery, you better be prepared for what's ahead. This is the place of abar. Because it has to come before it's too late. ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر. That we are so preoccupied with what? Accumulating and hoarding and this abundance of things. حتى زرتم المقابر, when eventually your final abode is what? The graves. كلا سوف تعلمون. That you will know, you shall soon know, you will know what's about to happen. ثم كلا سوف تعلمون. ثم is just reiterating that you will know. Surely you will know. كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين. If you have this knowledge of this certainty, this death, what will happen? What will you see? You will see what the punishment's going to be. So I'm prepared for it because it's good to have foresight. So when I go to the cemetery, I know this is my final abode. I prepare myself. I don't get shocked when I land in the cemetery and realize there's accountability. Why? Because I've seen this. So then we come to the question, is it permissible to visit the graves? This is a question that we have. I know people have been to the Hajj. When you go to Jannat al-Baqiyah, when you visit the Imam's graves in the Baqiyah, you have all these signs and held up and pictures that say it's haram to visit the graves, this is forbidden, doing this, doing that, women aren't allowed here, and they've got all these other things about people visiting the graves. And around the graves, you got Satan's henchmen all around the graves, telling people this is bid'ah, this is an innovation, this is polytheism, this is shirk, get away. Now, we have a confirmation from the Quran that it's only not permissible to visit whose graves? The graves of the unbelievers. In this, the Quran says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَلَا تُصَلِّ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ. Do not offer prayers upon any of them. Who is he talking about? The unbelievers. And he says this later, Allah Azza wa Jal. He says, وَلَا تُصَلِّ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ مَاتٍ. أبدا, at all, forever. He says, وَلَا تَقُمْ عَلَىٰ قَبْرِهِ. وَلَا تَقُمْ عَلَىٰ قَبْرِهِ. Once they're buried, do not stand at their grave, meaning do not visit their graves. Why? He says, إِنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَمَاتُوا وَهُمْ فَاسِقُونَ. Why? Because they disbelieved in Allah and His Messenger. And they died while they were defiantly disobedient. So this is where I cannot visit someone that isn't a believer. Even we have narrations where Aisha says that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam used to visit the graves in Baqiyah. There were companions buried in the Baqiyah. There were the Shuhada of Uhud, the martyrs of Uhud buried in the Baqiyah. Even Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam used to visit the grave of Hamza and Shuhada Uhud. We have narrations, the first rosary beads that we have, the masbaha, the first one that was made out of turba, out of the earth, was made from the grave of Hamza. Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam made this, and she made that masbaha, the spear, she made it from the earth of the grave of Hamza. In fact, when she went to her father's grave, this is one of the known couplets that you'll hear, where she says, ماذا على من شم تربة أحمد. That's what she mentions. And لا يشم مدى الزمان غواليا. She mentions this poem where she smells the what? She smells the earth from the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Not only she visited, she takes from the earth from his grave. So it's something that is permissible, something that is known, as we can see. It's in the Sunnah Nabawiyyah sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi tayyibin at-tahirin. When I visit the graves, I'm supposed to do, there's a certain etiquette in visiting graves. One of the things, I don't know, when anyone been to people have been to Salat al-Janaz, you know how you put your hand on the Janazi, when they're holding the carrier, the coffin, as they're carrying it to be removed, the people put their hands and they read the Fatiha. This is this is the etiquette of the grave as well. The second I arrive at a grave, it's makruh to lean on the grave, but I put my hand on the grave. and I read the Fatiha and I say, oh Allah, irham hadha al-mayyit. And there's a lot of things like reading Qul Huwallahu Ahad, reading Inna Anzalnahu fi Laylatul Qadr 11 times and 7 times in some narrations. And each one has their benefit. There's a lot of things that are, you'll find them all in Mafatih Jinan when it comes. Now, if you look first, we ask ourselves, when I visit and I'm doing all this, can the dead hear what I'm saying? Because when we do ziyarah, we do idhn al-dukhul, what do we say? And I believe that I believe that tasma'u kalami wa taruddu salami, that I believe that you hear what I say, and I believe that you respond to my salam, but I cannot hear you. So can the dead hear or not? Firstly, every Muslim in the world, Shia and Sunni, when they pray, what do they say? Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi. So if you're sending salam to a dead prophet, saying assalamu alayka, so is this what I'm actually doing? When I send salam, the problem is, as they said, unfortunately he doesn't hear because he is dead. It reminds me of this tweet someone put up, and it was it was astonishing that someone would write this. They said that why didn't the Prophet tell his companions after Hajj that they should go to Medina and visit his grave? Can you believe this guy actually wrote this? And someone responded, he said he was with him. The Prophet was with them. So how is he sending them to a grave when he's not even there? The Prophet was with them, so obviously he's not going to send them to the grave when the grave is not there. He's not buried at this point. So they have this thing where they say you speak to the dead, and the dead do not hear. Although in Sahih Bukhari it has this. In Sahih Bukhari it mentions Al-Mayyitu Yasma'u Khafqa Ni'al. You know what that means? It says that the dead hears even, do you know the Ni'al, the thong, we'll call it flip-flop, the sandal. The sandal that when you walk, the noise it makes on the sand, that light noise, even that the dead can hear, But unfortunately, our Prophet can't hear. The dead can hear the sandal in the sand, but our Prophet can't hear. This is the thing that they attack. Another thing, because this is one of the things when you visit the grave of the Prophet in Medina, and you are talking, Assalamu alaikum Rasulullah, he says, don't talk to Rasul, face the Qibla. He's dead, he can't hear you. And that's the thing, that he can't hear you, don't waste your time, face the Qibla. So, we have a verse in the Quran that talks about one of the prophets in Surah Al-A'raf, and this prophet was Nabi Shu'aib. على نبينا وآله وعليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام, the father-in-law of Nabi Musa ibn Amran alayhi salam. It talks about his people that says when they were punished with this earthquake, فأخذتهم الرجفة فأصبحوا في دارهم جاثمين. Earthquake happened, Allah punished them, and they became corpses in their homes. Everyone died. Not a single one was alive. He says, الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا شُعَيْبًا كَأَن لَّمْ يَغْنَوْا فِيهَا الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا شُعَيْبًا كَانُوا هُمُ الْخَاسِرِينَ. So Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that these people that rejected Shu'aib, it was as if they never resided there. That's how they died. And those that denied Shu'aib, it was they who were the losers. Why am I telling you this story? That these people, why have I just suddenly gone off on this tangent? I haven't. Here's the point we're getting to. He says, فَتَوَلَّ عَنْهُمْ. He turned away from them. And then he said, then he addressed them. وَقَالَ يَا قَوْمِ لَقَدْ أَبْلَغْتُكُمْ رِسَالَاتِ رَبِّي وَنَصَحْتُ لَكُمْ فَكَيْفَ آسَى عَلَى قَوْمٍ كَافِرِينَ. He says, "O my people," the ones that had been punished. He says, "I certainly conveyed my message from my Lord and I advised you. How can I grieve over disbelieving people? Like, I put all the effort in, you rejected me, and now you were punished." Why am I telling you this story? Because these unbelieving people that rejected Shu'aib and were punished by God were able to hear Shu'aib, yet our Prophet can't hear. Isn't this a tragedy? These people that claim the Prophet can't hear, doesn't hear when you say Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah, but the people of Shu'aib, these disbelieving people, these people that were not that weren't repentant to their master, to their Lord God, and were punished, they could hear, and the Prophet doesn't hear. Hala, there is a tie between the living and the dead. There's a tie. Allah Azza wa Jalla has left this. It's not like the door is closed. What these people do is they try and remove this. When you visit the grave, they look at these mushrikeen visit the grave. This is haram, this is forbidden. The tie between the living and the dead is constant. It never breaks. All those that die in the way of God, Allah makes it apparent. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ. Those that are killed in the way of God are living. The shaheed is living. If the shaheed is living, but they're living a good life, even the unbeliever is living. No one's dead. Once they die, the door of death is what? It's a door. وَإِنَّمَا تُنْقَلُونَ مِنْ دَارٍ إِلَى دَارٍ. The Prophet says death is what? It's a what? It's a transition from one abode to another. All you've done is move from one place to another. Even if you take a look, your relationship with the dead and how do I treat the dead? How do I deal with the dead? Once again, I'll give you another narration. This is also another Sunni opinion narration that goes against the hardliner that prevents you from visiting the grave. This is a narration on Abu Huraira. He says, on Abi Huraira, he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أهدوا لموتاكم. أهدوا لموتاكم means gift your deceased, the ones that have died. فقلنا يا رسول الله وما هدية الأموات. How do we give gifts to the dead? قال الصدقة والدعاء. Give charity on their behalf and do dua for them. So this is also another narration. And when you help them in hardship, another narration on Abu Abdullah as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says when you help them in hardship, with what? He says, inna salat, praying for them. Was sawm, sometimes you fast a day and give gift to the dead. Was sadaqa, and giving to the poor. Wal hajj, wal umrah, wa kullu amalin salih yanfa'u al-mayyit. Every good action you do benefits the dead. حتى إن الميت ليكون في ضيق فيوسع عليه. So even the dead person is in what? He's constrained, he's constricted, he's in a position where he's experiencing hardship in the grave. You actually give them what? Respite by doing a good action for them. Then he says, فيقال هذا بعمل ابنك فلان وأواء أخيك فلان أخوك في الدين. Then the dead is told, see, still that relationship. You know why we let you off and we gave you a rest? Because your son or your child did this, or your brother in faith. Your brethren in faith, your brother or sister in faith did something for you, so we gave you a reprieve. We gave you a respite. Hala, is this only for the believers doing deeds for the dead? Imam Al-Qadhim alayhi salam is asked, وَسَأَلْتُهُ, he says, I asked Imam Al-Qadhim, عَنْ رَجُلٍ يَحُجُّ وَيَعْتَمِرْ وَيُصَلِّ وَيَصُومُ وَيَتَصَدَّقْ عَنْ وَالِدَيْهِ وَذَوِي قَرَابَتِهِ. He says someone that does all good actions that I just mentioned, salah, sawm, sadaqah, for his parents or his near ones, his relatives. Imam al-Qadim says, لا بأس به يؤجر فيما صنع. That this thing, firstly, that يؤجر فيما صنع, that, and then he says, وَلَهُ أَجْرٌ آخَرٌ. So not only does the dead receive the reward of your actions, this is why when you tell people go Hajj, they tell you, what should I do Hajj for? I tell them, do the Hajj. If you've already done your wajib Hajj, do your next Hajj, qurbatan ila Allah, and give the reward to all the believers. Give the reward to all your near ones. Give the reward. And they say, what, does it get split up? I said, God's more generous than to split it up. Everyone gets the full reward and you get the full reward. وَلَهُ أَجْرٌ آخَرٌ. He gets his own reward. Ajrun akhar means its own. So say the Hajj constitutes, say, 100 reward points, for example. Every single person gets 100 reward points. Even you, the one that undertakes the action, gets it. So rather than saying, when I do it for myself and just take 100 on your own, be generous, everyone that you love and that you know. And then he says, وَلَهُ أَجْرٌ آخَرْ بِوَاتٍ بِصِلَتِهِ قَرَابَتِهِ. They also get another reward on top of that for what? For keeping the remembrance of their relation. Someone that's dead is someone that's very in need. The dead are in need of you. Then he says, قُلْتُ وَإِنْ كَانَ لَا يَرَى مَا أَرَى وَهُوَ نَاصِبٌ. He says, even if this person, لَا يَرَى مَا أَرَى, if he says, إِنْ كَانَ لَا يَرَى مَا أَرَى, it means if he's on another religion, say he doesn't follow what I follow. He says, قَالَ يُخَفَّفُ عَنْهُ بَعْضُ مَا هُوَ فِيهِ. If he's not a believer like you are, he won't get rewarded, but what he's been afflicted with will become less on him. So even in this way, you support them. So no one misses out on the reward. And as another narration says, وَيُكْتَبْ أَجْرُهُ لِلَّذِي فَعَلَهُ وَلِلْمَيِّتِ. So the ajr is for the one that does it and the dead. The other thing is, when you visit the dead, they feel that comfort when you're there. And when you leave, they feel that loneliness. So they also feel they're not only here. Another thing is, now we bring you to where we ask next to the dead. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, زوروا موتاكم فإنهم يفرحون بزيارتكم. Visit your deceased, your relatives, because they are happy when you visit them. Then he says, وَلْيَطْلُبْ أَحَدُكُمْ حَاجَتَهُ عَنْدَ قَبْرِ أَبِيهِ وَعَنْدَ قَبْرِ أُمِّهِ بِمَا يَدْعُو لَهُمَا. So here the Imam is saying, ask for your hajat, what your needs are, from who? From Allah. Where? At the grave of your father and at the grave of your mother. So if I'm asking for my hajat at the grave of my father and the grave of my mother, imagine what would happen when I ask at the graves of awliyaullah. Our prayers are answered when you go visit your parents' grave and do good amal. Ask Allah, Allah will answer your prayers. Imagine if you ask at the grave of the awliya, especially the grave of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. The ziyarah of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam is the most important thing that you can ever think of. The grave that needs to be visited is that grave. Abi Ja'far al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he says, muru, yani command, he says, muru shi'atana bi ziyarati qabr al-Hussein. Command our Shia, our followers, it means. Command our followers to visit the grave of Imam Hussein. فَإِنَّ إِتْيَانَهُ يَزِيدُ فِي الرِّزْقِ. Those that visit, their sustenance will increase. وَيَمُدُّ فِي الْعُمُرِ. It will increase your life. وَيَدْفَعُ مَدَافِعَ السُّوءِ. It will keep what's evil away from you. وإتيانه مفترض على كل مؤمن يقر له بالإمامة من الله. This is something as an obligation on everyone that believes in the imamat of Imam Hussein. To visit Abu Abdullah al-Hussein is something of the greatest importance, that even under the dome of Imam Hussein, to ask of what you want from Allah Azza wa Jal. To ask of what you want at this point. Anyone that visits any imam to begin with. You know, sometimes people say, all right, in the Quran it says, وَأَنْ لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. We don't get except what we do. You know what I mean? Your actions are what bring you the reward. To visit the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in itself is what grants you the intercession of the Imam. Man zarani fazartuh. Whoever visits me, I will visit them. Another thing is the days that you visit Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Sadiq says they are not taken into account. The days that I visit the Imam are not taken into account with my life. You know, when you eat, we have narrations that when I eat, while you eat, that time is not counted in your lifespan. When you visit the Imam, from when you leave, say for example, I'm meant to live 30 years or 40 years. When I visit Imam Hussein, from the moment I leave my house until I return, that is not considered in the time. Say I go there, I'm there for 3 weeks, that 3 weeks is added to my life total. It's not something that's taken from your life. Another narration to give you the example of visiting the Imam. They ask Imam Abil Hasan al-Rida salawatullah alayh about visiting the Imam. He says, Man zara Abi Abdullah al-Husayn بشط الفرات كمن زار الله فوق عرشه. This is one of those narrations that's very hard to even comprehend. That whoever visits the Imam on the shore of the Furat, the shore that he was forbidden to drink from, he says it is as if he visits Allah above his throne. See, you need to understand what does that mean. Because Allah Azza wa Jalla is not in a set place. What does it mean? It means that this is the position and station. You know, when we say in the Quran that Rasulullah got close to Allah, you know, فَدَنَا فَتَدَلَّى فَكَانَ قَابَ قَوْسَيْنِ أَوْ أَدْنَى. That Allah, Rasulullah got so close to God. Listen to what the words are. It says فَكَانَ قَابَ قَوْسَيْنِ. قَابَ قَوْسَيْن is when you you know, like what the indigenous Americans, or they call them the Red Indians, when they used to end the war, they used to say we're going to bury the hatchet. Qaba Qawsain is, you know, when you're at war, the two bows are facing each other. You're firing arrows at each other. So the Arabs in their military, and that when they used to come to peace, they used to bring the bows together and they form a whole, that we're at peace now. That was like burying the hatchet. So it says, فَكَانَ قَابَ قَوْسَيْن, that the Prophet was that close to God, meaning what? You know that Allah says, that He's أَقْرَبْ إِلَيْنَا مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. Allah's already close to us. So what does that mean? It means the station that Rasulullah reached in the Ma'raj, he was that close in that sense of nearness to God or proximity to God. But as to know that God's place, God there, when I asked Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, where is your God? He said, tell me where He is not and I will tell you He is. It's beyond I can, even we can't compute this. So when we're saying you visit God, it means you've reached the highest station in Ziyarat al-Hussein. Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, when he instructs someone to visit Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, he says, do dua for me when you are there. And the man says, Ju'iltu fidak. You are the station of dua. You're the Imam. You're the one that does dua. And the Imam says, no, do dua for me there. Because there are places where Allah likes to listen to the supplication. When you go to Ziyarat Hussein, why does Allah favor the ziyarah in the place of Karbala? Because when you're there, your heart's broken. When you're standing next to the grave, your heart's broken. So you actually feel what? You feel little for what you've done in your life. You look at how great Abu Abdullah al-Hussein is. You feel down at this moment. And you feel so down that you can't handle it. You're broken and you supplicate. In fact, everyone yearns to visit Imam Hussein. Two hadith with regard to Ziyarat Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And inshallah, Hajj Ahmad will begin the majlis. The first one, it says that on the day of judgment, ma min ahad, there will not be a single entity on the day of judgment, illa wa huwa yatamanna, except that they wish that they are of Zuwar Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. That's going to be the thing on the day of judgment. That's what everyone's preoccupied. The other narration, okay, Ishaq ibn Ammar says, I heard Abu Abdullah al-Sadiq alayhi salam say, لَيْسَ شَيْءٌ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ يَسْأَلُونَ. There's no one in all the heavens, you're talking about all the angels, except they ask who? Allah, and يَأْذَنَ لَهُمْ فِي زِيَارَةِ الْحُسَيْنِ. فَوْجٌ يَنْزِلُ وَفَوْجٌ يَعْرُجُ. That all these angels, all they seek permission, because angels know what's favored by Allah, to visit the grave of Imam Hussein. Fawj, a group of them, you're talking about a huge group of them, go down to the ziyarah, and a group rise. Taban, we're talking about moving to the heavens, but in reality, them coming down, they're rising towards Karbala. They're moving up towards Karbala, because this is the station, this is the center, this is where everyone turns. This is the school of sacrifice. This is the school of where you learn what religion is about. You learn where patience exists, where tolerance exists, where enduring and forbearing and sacrifice in the full meaning of the word. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifana'ik. عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك وعلى آلك المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا صاحب الرأس الذي فوق القناة مرفوع. هذا سلام من محب من قلبي. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. حسين يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. Looking down at the sands as we walk through the dark night, as I look down to see a burnt abaya. This is Zainab, al-Masa'ib, to see the shackles and the chains on my legs. I look up to see the light, but this light is not from the moon. Oh Zainab, where is it coming from? Yeah, is it coming from the spears of Banu Umayyah? Oh Zainab, I have a question. Yeah, how can light come from a spear? The spear. They took the head of Hussein and raised it on a spear. Wawela, they chained his women, and Allah they didn't fear. Oh Zainab, where are your protectors? Where is your Hussein and your Abbas? Yeah, where is your Hussein and your Abbas? عظم الله لكم الآج. The first person we would like to send our condolences to is Audi Sahib al-Zaman for the martyrdom of his grandfather, the massacre of his family, for the imprisonment and the captivity of his auntie Zainab. Brothers and sisters, we dedicate this night to Sayyidah Zainab and her Masa'ib, who they say that when she would return to Medina, her own husband, her own brother would not recognize her face. Ah, ya Zainab, the pain that is in your heart is burning in our hearts tonight as well. We want to say to you, Ya Zainab, on this night, that we are all your Abbas, we are all your protectors, we will never leave you. The tragedies you went through are our tragedies as well. Let's all mourn with Zainab. I am Zainab, the daughter of Ali. Zainab. They have killed and massacred my family. Have you seen my brother's head on a spear? The sight of these brought death near. عظم الله لكم الأجر, my dear brothers and sisters. As the captives of Karbala, the women of Imam Al-Hussein were about to be taken from the lands of Karbala. As the narrations say, on the 11th day of Muharram, the men of Umar ibn Sa'ad intended to leave Karbala. Umar ibn Sa'ad would ask his men to take camels to the women of Rasulullah, intending to put them onto the camels. They would bring the camels and say, "Come, O women, so we can put you onto the camels." As Umar ibn Sa'ad would like to leave this land, when Zainab would see these scenes, she would say, "O Umar ibn Sa'ad, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blacken your face in this life and the akhirah. You have asked these people to lift us onto the camels, and we are the haram of Rasulullah. Tell them to move away, and we will lift each other onto the camels." Zainab would then call all the women one by one. Ya Layla, Ya Ramla. All the women he would call one by one, and she would begin to lift them one by one onto the camels until reached a point where she was alone. It was just her and Imam Zain Al-Abideen. She would look left, she would look right. Would she be thinking, who's going to lift me onto the camel? As Imam Zain Al-Abideen was sick, very weak, he would look and say to his auntie, "Oh auntie, you can go onto the camel and leave me with these people." Zainab would go to the camel. She would look left and right. She would not see anything but the chopped up bodies. She would call out, "Wa ghurabata, wa akha, wa Husayna, wa Abbasa. Where is our direction after you, O Abu Abdullah?" The narrations say she would look at Imam Zain Al-Abideen as he got up, shaking in weakness, as he uses his cane to keep his balance. He would say, "Mount the camel, oh my auntie, for you have broken my heart." He would approach to help his auntie, but he would fall on the floor due to his weakness. When Shimr would see this, he would approach Imam Zain Al-Abideen, and he would hit Imam Zain Al-Abideen with a stick. As Imam Zain Al-Abideen calls, "Wa Jadda, wa Muhammada, wa Aliya." It is as if I am the family that was left behind in Karbala, asking what has happened to my family. Ya Karbala, raha wa hali, بين الألم عفاني. يا كربلاء عندك علم عن حيلتي وضعوني. أم الخدر مهجة علي، فوق الهزل كتفوها، حرقوا خباها يا وسف جيش الحداي لحقوها. يا كربلاء راحوا هلي، بين الألم عفوني. يا كربلاء عندك حلم عن حيلتي وضعوني ضربوها بسيات الهضوم فوق الثرى يطيحوها صارت توين بين الظلم يرضون القمار يسبوها يا كربلاء راحوا هلي بين الألم عفوني يا كربلاء عندك حلم عن حيلتي وضعوني They say that when the women would return to Karbala, the same way that they left, but this time they would return with the heads in their hands and not on the spears. What a scene would this be? As the women would attend to the bodies of their dear ones, they would attend to Qasim to find him missing a sandal. Ya Qasim, where did your sandal go? To find Ali al-Akbar cut up into pieces, irban irban. To find Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas with no hands and an arrow in his eyes. Maybe they would be beating their faces, saying, Wa Husayna. Then they would attend to the holy body of Abu Abdullah, the Nur of Muhammad. But how does the Nur of Muhammad lay? In what state? Ya Abu Abdullah, saying these words hurt my heart. What about the women and Zain Al-Abideen who had to see this firsthand? They would have attended to the body, to find it looted, to find the clothes, the arm of Abu Abdullah gone, to find the finger of Abu Abdullah missing. Why was this finger missing? It is because when they came to take the ring of Abu Abdullah, they couldn't pull it off the body because he was swollen. So they cut off his finger and took it with the ring. Ya Abu Abdullah, his body would be showered in arrows. Wa Husayna, wa Ghariba. For Zainab would throw herself onto the body of Abu Abdullah, calling Wa Akha, Wa Husayna, وابنة فاطمة الزهراء وابن علي المرتضى. She would put her hand on Abu Abdullah, face Medina and say, Sallallahu alayka يا رسول الله هذا حسين مرملا بدمه مقطع الأعظام. أنا بقيت محيرة واسفج بالايدين، لا عباس يبقالي ولا حسين، يا لا عباس يبقالي ولا حسين. يا صاحب الزمان. How can you handle the sight of Zainab at the murder side of Abu Abdullah? They say that even the enemies would cry to this scene. She would attend to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. What would she do? She would ask Abbas, where are your hands? Why is there an arrow in your eye? Why didn't you bring the water water for Sakina. Now you could imagine that maybe they would not drink water because they would say that Abu Abdullah didn't get to drink the water. She would throw herself onto Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, wailing and weeping over his body. Wa Abbasa, wa Abbasa, wa Abbasa, all together. Wa Abbasa, wa Abbasa, wa Abbasa, all together. Wa Abbasa. She would then throw herself onto Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas in all pain. Maybe she was talking to him. What would she say to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas if she could? Bo Fadl red alayya, ana Zainab Sibiya, بقيت بولية عداك وحيدة بهالمسية. فراق يصعب يصعب يصعب، زينب زينب زينب، زينب زينب زينب. يسلبون الأرامل ويضربون الثواقل، ويسيحن سيحة وحدة دخيلك يا ابو فاضل. صوت ينحاب ينحاب ينحاب، زينب زينب زينب، زينب زينب زينب. لما ردت اشوفك يا من نحر اتوفك، يا عباس الجرحني لما شفت كفوفك، وياك انحاب انحاب انحاب، زينب زينب زينب، زينب زينب زينب. يا ابو فاضل يا ابو فاضل، انا زينب رد عليا. يا ابو فاضل يا ابو فاضل، انا زينب رد عليا. يا ابو فاضل يا ابو فاضل، انا زينب رد عليا. يا حسين يا شهيد يا حسين، يا حسين يا شهيد يا حسين، يا حسين يا شهيد يا حسين، يا حسين يا شهيد يا حسين. نحن كما قال الكفيل ورمى المعين، والله إن قطعتم يسري واليمين، إني أحامي أبدا يا شيعتي عن ديني وعن إمام صادق الحق واليقين، صادقين بالفداء صادقين. يا حسين يا شهيد يا حسين، 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 يا حسين يا شهيد يا حسين. شيعتي لو شربتم عذب ماء فاذكروني، شيعتي لو شربتم عذب ماء فاذكروني، كما لكم جرى الدم في كربلاء عيوني. تذكروا مصابي في الطف وما ألا فهل من ناصر ناديت فانصروني. قادمين بالفداء قادمين، يا حسين يا شهيد يا حسين، يا حسين يا شهيد يا حسين، يا حسين يا شهيد يا حسين. I will start with you, in my heart is you, written on my two eyes. Madad ya Zainab, Madad ya Zainab, Madad ya Zainab, Madad. All together. Madad ya Zainab, Madad ya Zainab, Madad. مدد يا زينب. توجر نار قلبي وناشد وين دربي، وانام عيوني تربي. منو اللي ياخذ بيديا، منو اللي ياخذ بيديا. سألت الناس كلها جواب بكل مثلها، عوائل عن أهلها. عقيلة هاشمية، عقيلة هاشمي لهيبة نادي الدور بادي، دموعي تنادي. مدد يا زينب، مدد يا زينب، مدد يا زينب. Brothers, make a circle. مدد يا زينب، 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 يا زينب، يا زينب، مدد يا زينب. دخيل الله ودخيلك، دخيل الله ودخيلك، حرس والله كفيلك. عرفت من يعتلينك، أبد متخيبينا، أبد متخيبينا. أنا يسموني خادم عقيلة آل هاشم، وبضلوع الزهرة فاطم. دليل تجبرينا، دليل تجبري. دخيلك أنا يا بيت مولانا، فرج عين وانا. مدد يا زينب، 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 مدد Zainab. Your name is etched in me, your name is etched in me. So if your foes kill me, my blood will say as it falls. Ya Haidar and Ya Zahra, Ya Haidar and Ya Zahra. I know I'm not deserving to call myself your servant. I'm the servant of your servant, of Haidara and Zahra, of Haidara and Zahra. My heart is your fault, your heart is my fault, and I've closed the door. They can burn this door. Madad ya Zainab, Madad ya Zainab, Madad ya Zainab, Madad ya Zainab. The apple of his eyes, the rose's roots in the skies. So your scent is paradise, and that your feet were dust, and that your feet were dust. So as the sun that's rising, the light was made for brightening. But if it sees your highness, but if it sees your highness, the sun will be blinded, the sun will be blind. The lantern of light is missing from sight, buried in the night. Madad ya Zainab, Madad ya Zainab, Madad ya Zainab, Madad ya Zainab. Allahumma salli ala محمد وآل محمد. Ya Allah, we ask you by the Gharib of Karbala, we ask you by the hands of Abu Fadl, we ask you by al-Masaib Zainab to bring us closer to Abu Abdullah, to bring us closer to Allah. We ask Imam Al-Hussein and al-Masaib to bring us closer to them, to show us the way. Allahumma ajjal liwaliyika al-faraj. Allahumma kun liwaliyik الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناثرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توحا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين. All together. السلام على الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجن. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك واجعلنا من خير أعوانك وأنصارك والمستشهدين بين يديك. ورحمة الله وبركاته. الصلوات على محمد وآل محمد.